Alright, in this video I'm going to cover terrain and texturing. Now, I was going to explain why these colored tiles are down here. Now, these render black. So, in the visibility system, if I turn the markers back on, you would not be able to see from inside here out to here. But if this was dirt here, you would still see dirt outside this room, or potentially this cobblestone tile outside this room. And you don't want the player to think that there's something out there, so you use this colored tile. Now, I'm going to turn the markers back off, and here's how you can place or change the tiles on the ground. And they're not really tiles, they're just polygons that I used an 8x8 square, I believe, for each section. So you choose textures, and I'm going to say set the texture to, let's go with the skull texture. That's awesome. You'd like to turn on the home key so you can see where it's going to do it. And anywhere you put the mouse and just hold it down, it'll texture that, obviously, to the skull texture. Now, with this, you can say texture, choose this upper left hand corner one that's under the text, but choose that one, and now you're setting this colored tile. When you do that, this tile will end up rendering black. So that's why you put it here, so that the player doesn't see anything out here. You can also move the polygons. And I'll cover that quickly because that is fairly important. And I do think I have an error over here I could kind of fix right now. It's a small error, but it is definitely here. See, here is a piece of the cobblestone sticking out from the wall from inside the room. So I turn on single vertice mode. I'm going to turn the grid off because I already have it here with the home key. With single vertice mode on, I can drag the vertices. Now, automatically adjust the texture coordinates so that it doesn't stretch the texture. And you don't want to drag this polygon vertice over the top of one of these because that can look goofy. But I can move this underneath the wall so that the player doesn't see that little bit sticking out. Over here is another small piece. Push that in just a little bit. It's underneath the wall, invisible to the player. You'll want to go around and do that so that this looks, good when you're when the player's actually playing. And that's pretty much all there is to that. Now, there's one thing I do want to talk about in terms of when you're setting a texture. Let's go with here. I'll set something obvious. See what the next page has. All right, let's just go with white marble. That would be good. So as you can see, I'm setting the white marble textures. Now, if you have turned this texture, this section 90 degrees with F4, do it. Oops, what's going on here? That was weird, it wasn't doing it. I've turned this the opposite direction. Now when you click, it can't figure out where exactly you're trying to click because you've tilted it, in this case 180 degrees. So now it's back to normal. So when you do tilt something, you might want to put it back to normal for a second if you need to change the ground texturing, and then put it back to where it was. That's just a minor little thing you need to keep in mind. Okay, so now I'm going to cover some texturing of like regular grass and things like that. So I'm going to press Shift F2 just so you see me using this. The regular area that I've been designing is map number 1 right here. So by clicking this, it's going to take me there. And then it's going to load all the graphics in map 1. So I'm going to pause the video and let that happen. Okay, so here it has put me in the middle of map 1, and it took a few seconds to load the graphics for it. And you know what? I'm going to actually go to map 2. This map is mostly blank. I go here. Yeah, there's a lot of blank area here. So, if you want to texture the ground to whatever, choose a textures button. I'm going to go to the first page here. Now, turn off set texture. That we had that on for setting a texture to a specific texture with no feathered edges and no multi-texturing. So we don't want that. So let's say I'm going to set this leafy ground texture. I'm going to choose that. And this automatically chooses set texture small. So there's the leafy ground texture. Now, set texture small obviously just sets one vertex at a time. Well, not obviously, but that's what it does. You can choose then set texture large or set texture huge, which I believe does just a huge square. So this I kind of use for like the underneath trees and things like that. So let me reload the map. And set texture, well, first let me show you what it means to multi-texture. So I'm going to go with a multi-texture medium. See how big that is. That's about the size of a path. Now multi-texture is drawing this leafy ground on top of the grass, whereas set texture replaces the grass with the leafy ground. And so the difference is there's actually two textures here. But when you're set texturing, it sets the texture specifically to that the texture, but it will I hope I'm explaining this right. The edge will still feather from one texture to the next. So even with a set texture, let's go to this medium. Even with a set texture, notice there's a little bit sharper edges here. With the multi-texture, it's much smoother. Now this can be an issue because the game allows, or the engine allows, 3 textures on any given tile. So now I have 2. So if I choose another one, let's choose sand. And I'm going to multi-texture medium. It will allow this. Okay. But if I try to multi-texture another texture over the top of this, let's do lava, it's going to screw up because it can't put a 4th texture on top of this. There's already 3 here: sand, leaves, and grass. It won't put this on top of there. So if you get to a situation like that, and oh, I put a troll over there. He's actually marking the spot where I want to put a troll camp, but we'll ignore him for now. If you want to set this to the lava texture, then you choose set texture. Let's go with medium, and now it will set the texture directly over. Now here you can see where it's got some sharp edges because there's already 3 textures, and it can't multi-texture the lava into this. It can't feather the edge because it can't draw a 4th texture right here. There's already 3. So in situations like that, you'll need to make sure that when you see this, you'll have to make sure that you set the texture everywhere so you get the feathered edges going along. Get rid of any errors. Then change over to multi-texture medium and go along the edges to multi-texture the lava nicely into the next texture. Although you would never put lava next to grass, because you're going to want to have like dirt, burnt ground dirt, and then lava, because lava would never grow next to, or grass would never grow directly next to lava, obviously. So that's essentially how you texture the ground. Let me reload the map and show you another feature that is nice. You choose a texture, and you can tell it to do 2 random textures between, let's say, this grass and this grass. Now, multi-texture medium textures randomly between those 2. So if you want things to look a little less tiled, which it will. Now, in a designer like this, you can see this looks tiled. You can see the repetitiveness of this. that is pretty much going to happen no matter what texture you use. I've experimented with it quite a bit. It's like really hard to get rid of. So you kind of got to hide it using this technique where you're multi-texturing with two different types of grass. Also, you have to keep in mind that once you put trees here and you have other objects here and potentially some other textures below the trees, it looks far better. But players will see in a large open area, you'll see this repetitive texture look, and that's not good either. But if you need to have a large open area, I would put some grass and rocks and things like that to help hide that kind of thing. You can use the triple random texture. Let's go with this, this, and this, and that works just as the same way as the other one, choosing randomly between those three as it does it. You have to be careful with that now, though, because you have 3 textures everywhere here, and that's the maximum. So you couldn't put a trail going through the woods and have the trail cross over this area. So if you did a texture, let's just do like this dirt and try to make a trail going through the woods, it'll work fine over here, and then it starts to goof up. So again, if you wanted to actually have that trail do that, you'd have to say set texture medium size to set the texture to that trail. But even in that case, you end up with some sharp edges here because it's trying to feather the edge into things near it, and there's already 3 textures there, and it can't put this 4th texture there. So when you want to have a trail going through the woods, my recommendation, let's reload the map, is set everything up with just 2 textures right away. So we'll go with multi-texture medium. You'd have your trail going through. Whoops, don't pull the mouse too fast. You'd have your trail going through. Set up your trees and everything, and then specifically go and place other types of grass and things using the different techniques, and leave the trail alone so that you don't accidentally mesh with it and cause a sharp edge. I think this would also be a good time to cover placing groups of objects, which I didn't cover in the basic object stuff. Here is a bunch of categories of things where you can place groups of objects. So flowers, for example. Click and it just places a random flowers wherever you click. That may or may not be that useful. It's just something I thought about adding. Mushrooms can be more useful, just random groups of mushrooms. But it comes in very handy with forest 1. So forest grouping 1 is a grouping of trees of a certain type. Forest grouping 2 is a different type of tree, just allowing you to easily create different types of forest. And then let's go with forest 3. I think has more pine trees. Yep. Just depends on what you want. So whatever you want to design, you can decide on the 3 different types of forest. Or if you want to place the trees manually, I wouldn't recommend wasting that much time, but if you want to do that, you can. And then I'll also show you in terms of those item categories here. You may have noticed that there's floor junk is an option. I use that for dungeons. You can place this floor junk just to put random stuff in the dungeon. I think I need to add more objects to this. I'd like to have more, broken vases and stuff like that, but we'll do that in the future. Then you also have, there's rocks. If you're off in the forest, you want to place groupings of rocks. And then there is spiky rocks. These are just different type. And then, let's see, bones. Bones I like to use for areas where there's a bunch of dead bones, which you've seen me use those over in the Volucris dungeon. There's a couple corners with bones in them like that. That's how I did that.